just arguing on a keyboard, because anyone can take 5 minutes to Google stuff to like find their confirmation biased point and then put it out. And then that's all you're doing. You're just putting these confirmation biasy points and no one's listening to it. You might as well just yell at this wall here because nothing's going to change and no one's going to change their opinion. And I get sucked into them all the time. And I even say them in the middle of the argument. I'll be like, I don't know why I'm doing this on social media because I know no one's here is going to change their mind. No.
And I think that, again, another reaction why heChange is being built is the reaction to social media. It's because there is all of that. It's so easy to get triggered. I mean, you used to use that buzzword that everyone seems to be using these days by what people will say. And like you say, they're living in the echo chamber. When they're biased towards something, that echo chamber, it's coming back at them in every direction because of the way that these algorithms work. And it's driving us crazy. And mental health, in my opinion, I'm really grateful for this, that mental health has never in my life been as on the forefront as it has now. People are talking about their mental health in ways that they never have. And a favorite word of yours and mine is vulnerability. And
Brene Brown,
baby. I'm a
Brown.
big fan. I'd buy that woman a whiskey. I believe that she would drink whiskey. I don't know if that's true or not, but I like to think that she would.
Bourbon, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to think that. We're fans of being vulnerable. And you talk about relationships.
I'm not a fan of being vulnerable. Let's get that out of the way right now.
We're fans of the amazing progress that vulnerability brings with it.
Yeah.
And you feel better in the end.
I believe it's important and it's worth it. And it's worth it to be vulnerable and it's worth it to seek out your friends. It's not easy. And I don't enjoy it. Nobody likes scraping their knees in the arena, right? Nobody likes falling down in the arena, but it's important.
Sometimes being vulnerable can be also just listening too, though, can't it? Can't it just be that that awareness that you were talking about? Like, aren't you sort of being vulnerable if you have put down your stones and are actually listening or reading the signs on the other side and taking it in? Isn't that vulnerability?
Trying to grow. So you're listening to try to grow.
That's not easy sometimes.
Because it's dropping the ego.
Sure.
Ego is the hardest thing. Ego is, I always say, it's that peg in the ground that everything else in your life swirls around. It's that ego, and it's our point of reference to everything. And it's really hard because your brain wants to keep, when you form an opinion, when you finally go, that's my opinion, and you tweet it out, it's really hard to change that. It's a part of the brain. It takes a long time for an opinion to change. So it has to be challenged quite rigorously. But once you've formed it, it's really hard to change, especially as you get older, right? When people are in their 60s, 70s, they're set in their ways.
You ever see Kevin Smith's movie Dogma?
No.
Talks about religion that way. And there's a line in that movie where Chris Rock's in that movie and he plays a character called Rufus. He was supposedly the 13th apostle, and it's satire. Right. And he says to somebody, beliefs are terrible or whatever. And he's like, what? What do you mean beliefs are terrible? He goes, I don't know. I just think it's better to have ideas. An idea is easy to change. A belief is very, very tricky. People die for it. People kill for it. Like, but just having ideas means that you're right there, you're open to evolving. And many times the other way is not.
I think that's what humans are meant to do. Yeah. They're meant to work together and be a collective. And we have some competition in us. And I could be wrong. I'm a believer that we are meant to be more of a collective than we are to be competitive, because it's survival of the fittest, right? Yeah. Charles Darwin.
Yep.
And there's a lot, as an activist, I really like Peter Joseph. I mention him in pretty much every podcast.
Yep.
But he talks about how that paper has really been bastardized, right? Because survival of the fittest was not one human over another, one lion over another. It was a species' ability to adapt and survive over its environment together as a collective. It was not talking about being the top dog in any one thing. We've taken that and rolled with it, and the propaganda comes out that we have to be this competitive culture. And I'm not getting into like capitalism or anything, like that's a whole different thing, but this ideology that we have to be hyper competitive. What's the first thing you teach your kids when they have the cognitive ability to learn stuff? Share. Learn to share. Got to make sure you share. Why? What part of adulthood tells you need to share?
That's an interesting question.
Right? Like why? Like if we...
But in that, aren't we teaching them not to be dicks?
But then we have a whole culture built around being a dick. It's just... So for me, I think...
That's an interesting point of view.
When you get stuck in these ways for so long, and I think it is changing. I think it's definitely we have more, like Elon Musk is doing some of this, right? More
Sure.
open source. Instead of intellectual property, it's more open source.
Yep.
But could you imagine, instead of having intellectual property, if just everything was open source in blockchain technology?
Absolutely.
Do you know how fast technology would
Everything
grow?
would develop. The whole, culture would develop. Prosperity would develop because it would be equalized, and money wouldn't be the driving force. Speaking of what's going on, so you just ended a pretty significant relationship.
Yeah.
You just had a big breakup.
Yeah. So I will say, yeah, I have. So I was with someone, I was engaged actually, and I was with this woman for 7 years. It ended kind of blindsided me because it was not my decision.
Yeah.
For the best, definitely. I'm starting to see that now, but it's only been 3 months, so it's really hard. It's
been 3 months, and you're now starting to see that it was for the best.
Yeah, so it's a really good book. My boss at the YMCA gave me right at this time. She went through something similar called Option B, and it's about a woman who works for Facebook whose husband dies at like 50. And it talks about grief. So I'm over the acute grief stage. So that's that dread. The world is ending.
So the world isn't ending, but you thought it would.
But the thing with grief, stages of grief, they're a back and forth. It's not perfect, right? I have good days, I have bad days. Yeah. I'm doing everything I can, going to counseling. I'm on medication, and I'm okay with it. I'm proud of myself for doing that. And
we're not going to talk more about that now. That we're going to talk about. We're going to dive into that the next time we talk. But it's good to establish a rapport and beforehand. And when it comes to going through this epic event in your life, and your mental health is challenged, your mental health has had challenges in the past from other things as well, right? And going back, and you are vulnerable and open to talking about those things.
Yeah. So if we split my life in half, half my life I spent in a very negative, unproductive way of thinking within mental health, blocked a lot of stuff out. We can get into that. And it wasn't until I was about 26 where I had some other incident happen, and I started working on it. So if I hadn't gone through all of that and started to work on that mental health a few years ago, this would have been a lot harder for me to deal with. But I had already built a little bit of a foundation of like, okay, I'm not okay, but what do I need to do to be okay, to pull myself out of this?
Yeah.
And it's messy, and it's definitely not perfect, and it requires a lot of support, and requires a lot of self-reflection, and there's anger, and then there's blame on yourself and the other person. And it's
those other stages of grief are real.
Yeah. But you need to understand it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing for me to ever tell myself, is that it's okay for me to feel this way, because I am my own worst critic, as we probably all are.
Yeah.
But I blamed myself for everything, and it's really taken a lot of support from the people around me, you, Candy, people that are closest to me, friends that forced it out of me when I just wanted to hide in my room and not come out. I had Sergio and Alex, two of my best friends. They pulled me out and they forced me to talk about it. And if it wasn't for all the people around, I'm going to get emotional.
No, it's okay. Not now. We're just teasing that you're going to get emotional next time.
If it wasn't for the people around me,
yes,
I wouldn't have been able to get through this. And my last birthday, which was in May, was right in the middle of this stuff. And it was a hard day. And I decided, instead of being negative, I'm going to write a gratitude post on Facebook.
Look at you.
11:45 at night. I didn't post it till about 12:45 at night. It took me an hour because it just brought out everything. And I just sobbed like a baby. And when I posted, I was still a mess. And then Sergio and Alex called me because I mentioned them in it. And I couldn't even talk. And it was actually kind of funny because like it's just like dead silence for a minute. But that's the thing, is you have to seek out help, and you can't do it alone. You just can't. Not if it's to that degree. And if you don't try to get help, it's never going to get better. And we know, like the statistic you talked about in the intro, we know how it ends up if we don't work on it.
Yeah. Man, I'm going to finish talking about something that you spoke about 20 paragraphs ago. And it was that, because you've gone through stuff and you started on this journey, it made what you're going through right now easier. And there's people out there who are watching this. There are men who are in pain watching this. I mean, at the end of the day, we want this to be as positive we want he changed it to be as positive an experience as possible. But there's a lot of guys who are here that are in pain. They're living quiet lives of desperation. And for you to say, you know what, going through this, hey, whatever you guys are going through, this is building you a skill that will help you go through shit in the future. And many times guys are logical and like the idea of that. It's like, you know what, you're going through this shit right now, but it gets better. You know, if I can borrow that phrase, it gets better. And not only that, you will now have another skill that you don't have at that point. And I think that that's a great place for us to end. It's a good tease for the next episode. I thank you very much for being here. Thank you for being one of my best friends and one of my favorite people on the planet. And I enjoy doing projects with you. And thank you for helping us out with this project.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, we always have fun. So check out World of Grey.
Yeah.
It's not as refined as this podcast is probably going to be. It's very much a back and forth cluster. We're going to call it waiting for my time to talk.
Yeah.
My turn to talk. Yeah.
And yeah, that is absolutely sums it up so beautifully. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
And you and Candy are doing really good work here, so you should be proud of yourselves.
Thank you very, very much. For heCast, I am Mike Chisholm.